on the outside, always looking in. Will I ever be more than I've always been? Cause I'm tapping on the glass, waving through a window. Can anybody see? Is anybody waving back at me? Hello everybody, welcome. We're gonna do a whole class today on Dear Evan Hansen. Now, Dear Evan Hansen is a musical that is very, very near and dear to my heart for a couple of reasons. The first reason is that this musical came out literally when I was a senior in high school. And it's about a senior in high school who struggles with his mental health and who has a kind of complicated relationship with his mother. And it came out at the time where I was exactly the age of the main character, and I was dealing with a lot of the same things that the main character deals with. So it hit me very hard, and it helped me through that time in a big way. Another reason that this show is so near and dear to my heart is because this was the first show that I auditioned for professionally, the first big show that I auditioned for professionally as an actor and got really far in the callback process for. I began auditioning for the Toronto production in my home and native land, and I did like 11 rounds of callbacks for that. And then I got to go down to New York to audition for the Broadway and National Tour companies, and I did another 9 or 10 rounds of auditions for that. And my last audition was on March 4th, 2020. After which, obviously, the world shut down and the borders closed and I couldn't go down to the States anymore, and that was the end of that. But this musical taught me a lot about what it means to be a professional actor through that experience, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. And that experience taught me a lot about this show. I spent a lot of time with it, and I studied it on a very, very deep level. I was auditioning to play the main character, so I had to learn every scene. And so I know this show really, really well, and I'm excited to share with you a few of the things that I know about this show today. We're going to talk a little bit about the show itself. What's it about? What's the plot? Basic stuff like that. If you are totally new to this show, we'll get you in the loop. Then we'll talk about the movie, which famously was a big disaster, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Then we're going to talk about the score. It wouldn't be a Mateo class if I didn't break down the score, and specifically my favorite motifs in the score. You know I'm a fan of a musical motif, and we're going to look at one key motif that kind of represents the entire theme of the show and is peppered throughout the score in a really interesting way. And then we're going to talk a little bit about my experience auditioning for the show. And we'll play, even if we're very lucky, we may get to see one of my audition videos from back in the day. Alright, so, before we move on, there is a trigger warning in effect. Mental health, suicide, self-harm. This is not a very happy musical. This musical deals with these issues in explicit detail, so just be aware of that if that's something that affects you. The show. Let's talk about it. So this is Evan Hansen. Evan is a 17-year-old who deals with a serious social anxiety disorder. And it's made him feel very isolated and alone. This is Connor Murphy. Connor's kind of Evan's bully at school. He's also kind of a loner kid, isolated, but rather than dealing with it in the way that Evan does, shutting down, removing himself from situations, Connor deals with it by being aggressive and lashing out. And he pushes Evan down in the hallways. He's kind of a bully to Evan. One day, Evan is writing a letter that his therapist has told him to write. A letter to himself. Dear Evan Hansen, today is going to be a good day, and here's why. Connor finds this letter and steals it, runs off with it. A few days later, we find out that Connor has taken his own life. And his parents found on his person, when they found his body, Evan's letter. So they believe that it's a suicide note that Connor wrote to Evan. Evan, obviously being this socially anxious kid, doesn't know how to respond to this, and so he doesn't want to break Connor's parents' hearts, and so he lies to them and tells them that, yeah, we were actually great friends, even though he didn't really know Connor, and he only ever knew Connor as kind of this bully figure in his life. And so he tells this story of how him and Connor spent this beautiful day at the orchard together and how they were best friends, and the lie starts to spiral out of control. Now, while this lie is being told, Evan actually gets a lot of the things he's always wanted. He gets the chance to form a connection with with Connor's family. He gets the chance to date Connor's sister, Zoe, who he's always had a crush on. And he even gives a speech at a memorial for Connor that goes kind of viral on the internet, and he becomes like a micro internet celebrity as well. So he's suddenly popular at school, he's suddenly popular online, he has the girlfriend of his dreams, everything goes well for him. But it's all based on this lie. And eventually the guilt gets to be too much, he tells the truth, and he loses everything. This story is an example of a Faustian bargain, which is, as you can see, a deal where someone trades something of great moral or spiritual value, like their soul, or like their honesty and integrity, for worldly or material benefits, such as gaining popularity at school, gaining connection, gaining the chance to date the girl that they're in love with. Often with tragic or self-defeating consequences, such as when everyone finds out the truth, they cancel you online. If you were here for my class on Defying Gravity, when we did that, I think last month it was, we talked a little bit about the tragic arc and the comic arc. So these are two ways to structure a story. The tragic arc, things start out not so great, but then they get very, very good all of a sudden. However, it's a false victory and it ends in, well, tragedy. It ends with, oftentimes in the Shakespearean version anyway, people dying. And everything's terrible and horrible at the end. A comic arc, everything starts out great, la-di-da, suddenly there's a problem, and oh no, what's going to happen? But then everyone solves it, happy ending at the end, that's a comic arc. And the tragic arc kind of traces the shape of a sad face, and the comic arc traces the shape of a smile. The interesting thing about a story that's based around a Faustian bargain is that inherently it has both arcs in it. If you look at the material reality of Dear Evan Hansen, we've got a very clear tragic arc, right? Evan starts out alone and miserable, but then Evan finds connection, even though it's based on a lie. And then at the end, Evan loses his community. Starts out pretty bad, gets good in the middle, and then ends in a loss. That's the material reality. But if we look at Evan's spiritual reality, the spiritual journey that he goes on, that kind of traces the comic arc, because it starts out with him genuinely trying to help a grieving family. He doesn't want to break their hearts. He's trying to tell them what he thinks they want to hear. Dun dun dun. Evan gets high on celebrity and mistreats those around him. And then at the end, Evan tells the truth. So there's this genuine urge to help. Then he gets sucked into the evil of this lie, but at the end he comes around and he tells the truth, and his spirit, his soul is cleaned, even though materially that results in him losing his community. And this spiritual comic arc combines with this material tragic arc to give us the moral of the story, which is, he says it in the very first monologue of the entire show, be yourself. That's kind of a cliche. What it means more specifically is you don't have to lie about who you are in order to be liked. Evan comes up with this lie, and he ends up finding the connection that he's always wanted. But at the end of the day, when people find out that that isn't who he really is and that he's been lying about himself, he loses all of that connection. At the end of the show, though, he reconnects with his mother, who's the one person who really loves him for who he is. And that connection is so much more meaningful and so much more important. And that's the moral of the story. You don't have to lie about who you are in order to be liked. The right people will like you for who you are when you're just being yourself. But I think this is a really important lesson for high schoolers to learn today. On social media, social media is a highlights reel of our lives. On social media, you post all the good things that are happening, and you can even catfish somebody, which is a term that means you pretend to be somebody completely different than who you are. You can literally assume a fake identity, and all it takes is for you to download a photo of someone who isn't you and use that as your profile picture. It's that easy to lie about who you are on social media. And so social media can be a kind of dangerous place for teenagers for that reason. And I think it's really, really right now for teenagers to be exposed to this message. It's so easy to lie about who you are, and it's so easy to chase that shallow validation that social media has to give you. But this musical teaches us that those shallow connections that are based on lies are not the connections that really, really matter. So that is the show. That's what Dear Evan Hansen is all about. It's written with beautiful music by Pasek and Paul, who wrote the music to The Greatest Showman and some of the lyrics to La La Land as well. Great songs and a beautiful score, a beautiful message. However, some of this moral was maybe, let's say, misinterpreted by social media discourse when the movie came out. So that's what we're going to talk about next. So, the movie of Dear Evan Hansen, I actually got to see it with my mother in its world premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival. So the reviews hadn't come out yet. Nobody was talking about it online yet, right? We got to go in fresh and formulate our own opinions about it before we had been influenced by anyone else. And me and my mom really liked the movie. We thought they did a lot of great things. We loved a lot of the decisions they made to translate the song from stage to screen. We thought the new song that they wrote for the movie was a great song. We thought that the songs that they chose to cut from the movie were smart choices for the most part. They were the most melodramatic songs, like Good For You, for example. Songs that work really well on a stage, but maybe don't work with the intimacy of the camera, or maybe aren't needed for us to understand what's going on in that character's mind because we can see it on their face because we're seeing it in close-up, that kind of thing. We thought that a lot of the changes they made were great. And we loved that at the end of the movie, Evan apologizes publicly on Instagram for his lie. So, in the stage production, the consequences he faces are very private. No one ever finds out that he was lying, except for the Murphy family, and he loses that connection with them. But in the movie, he actually posts about it on Instagram, so everybody finds out, and so he faces much more harsh consequences for his actions. And I liked that choice. I thought that was a great choice to really raise the stakes on that journey that Evan goes through and teach Evan a more concrete, tangible lesson. So me and my mom, we liked the movie. The only thing we didn't like about it was the way that they made Ben Platt look. So that's reason number one why the movie failed. Is this mannequin makeup. Ben Platt was 26 years old when they filmed the movie. Now, some news outlets reporting on the kind of sensational discourse that was happening about how old Ben Platt was, some news outlets might tell you that Ben Platt was 28. That is not true. He was 28 when the movie came out. He was 26 when they filmed the movie. 26 is not that old for someone portraying a high schooler in a movie. That's actually just not that old. The entire cast of Glee, basically, was older than 26 when they were playing high schoolers. You know, Stockard Channing in Grease famously was like 34 or something. So the problem wasn't that Ben Platt was inherently too old. The problem was that they were so afraid of how old he looked that they put him in this weird, glossy, almost like plasticky makeup that made him look not 26 anymore, but not 17 either. He made him look like a kind of uncanny valley mannequin. And then when he started crying, the makeup scrunched up in a way that was really horrible and unattractive and difficult to look at. And so people had a much harder time buying into the reality of this show when, you know, the main character looked like a robot, kind of. So that was the first big mistake that the movie made. The second mistake, I think, was, it wasn't even a mistake, it was just the fact that social media discourse was already so vitriolic at the time. The movie came out at the height of the pandemic, and at that time, you know, we were all cooped up inside, we were all angry and scared, and a lot of people turned to social media rage bait to get those emotions out. And it also happened kind of when the Me Too movement was at its peak, and so people, for better or worse, were very resistant to the idea of seeing a movie that centered a white male who did something bad. People were not in a place where they were ready to observe that situation with any sort of nuance. And Lord knows social media is not the number one place for nuance in the world. So that was part of the reason why the movie failed, I think. And the third reason is because of the marketing. I think that there is a tendency to market this show as a feel-good, happy-go-lucky high school musical, and to focus on the fact that it's pop music, and everybody loves a pop musical, and this is a musical for today. This is a contemporary musical. It's fun. It's pop. It's good for, like teenagers, and you should come see it because of that. It's cool. It's not your regular musical. It's a cool musical. That is so the wrong approach, in my opinion. The point of this show is that it is actually a very nuanced, morally gray exploration of somebody who does something that is pretty terrible in order to find the connection that they long for. So there's a nuance in that, and because of that, it's a very interesting story and a very interesting character. And the Broadway marketing really leaned into that. The Broadway marketing sent the message, this is the story, it's complicated, the central character is really messed up, come see him struggle and see if he can figure it out. So this, I'm going to play now a clip of the marketing from Broadway, a clip of Ben Platt singing Waving Through a Window on a Talk Show, and then I'll play a clip from the Toronto production, In My Home and Native Land, which also closed very, very quickly and was a failure at the box office. And see if you can spot, and put them in the chat, all the differences between the Broadway marketing and the marketing that they did for the Toronto production and later the movie. So this is the Broadway production, the Broadway marketing, where they lean very heavily into the story. See if you can spot the differences. So that's the Broadway version. Now here's what they did in Toronto. They cast Robert Marcus, who's a friend of mine, and he's a fantastic vocalist. But just look at the different choices that they made in terms of marketing the show, in terms of trying to sell this show to people.
I've learned to slam on the brake before I even turn the key, before I make the mistake, before I lead with the worst of me. Give them no reason to stare, no slipping up if you slip away. So I got nothing to share, no, I got nothing to say. Step out of the sun if you keep getting burned. Step out of the sun because you've learned, On the outside, always looking in, will I ever be more than I've always been? 'Cause I'm tapping on the glass, I'm waving through a window. I try to speak but nobody can hear, so I wait around for an answer to appear while I'm watching people pass. I'm waving through a window. Oh, can anybody see? Is anybody waving back at me? When you're falling.
That's enough of that. Yeah, so let's see what people said in the chat. Alice says, no context. Exactly. Steven says, Evan is not awkward like on Broadway. Well, actually, Evan is awkward like on Broadway, but Robert Marcus is not awkward. And that's the key difference to me, is that Robert Marcus is not performing in character. Like Audrey says, just a pretty guy singing a pretty song. Jeffrey says lack of drama. Totally. Joanne says no angst. Exactly. Danny, JR, and Alex and Alice all came up with the same point, which is that there's no context in the Toronto version. This is just a song, right? It's just a good song. And Robert Marcus is a great singer, and he really blows the lid at the end of this song, and he sounds incredible. But he's not wearing the costume, right? He's singing into a microphone. There are close-ups of the people playing guitar. It's very much, this is someone singing a song. in this version, they included a scene with Zoe where Ben Platt was completely in character, right? He's wearing the costume and he's wearing a lav mic so that he doesn't have to hold a microphone like a pop star. He is playing Evan Hansen. So this marketing sends the message, hey, come see a story about this character. And this sends the message, hey, come hear this show with some good tunes. If you come to see a show expecting good tunes, and what you get is 2.5 hours of, like, morally gray, suicide-related content, drama, you are going to be surprised. That is not what you signed up for. And I think that's the main reason that the Toronto production flopped, and I think that it's also the main reason that the movie flopped. Here is a poster for the movie, and the tagline here, this is the culprit, a story for the outsider in us all. In the original Broadway production, the tagline was a letter that was never meant to be seen, a lie that was never meant to be told. Evan Hansen is about to get the one thing he's always wanted, the chance to finally fit in. The implication there, he's about to get the chance he's always wanted, but at what cost, right? That tagline on Broadway tells us that it's a messy, complicated story with a morally gray decision that the central protagonist is grappling with. This tagline makes it feel like a kind of happy-go-lucky high school musical, and so when people come to see the show, they aren't willing to buy into the premise because they don't know that the writers are critiquing Evan's behavior at all. They think that it's supposed to be just happy and go lucky, and the fact that there's all of this moral gray area is very kind of off-putting to people because of the marketing. So I think that's the last reason why the movie didn't do as well as the stage show. We're going to talk about the score in a moment, but first let's hop on over to the homework. The homework was to watch this video on the Broadway Mavens YouTube channel, which is all about the symbolism of Evan's cast, and to respond in the comments with what do you think is another symbol in a Broadway show. Julian responded with, I think Elphaba's hat in Wicked is a good example of a Broadway symbol. Glinda first gives it to her as a joke, but later in the show, Elphaba wears the hat a lot more in the show and also serves as a symbol of the unexpected friendship between her and Glinda. Totally agree. And Heather says, the mask in Phantom of the Opera is also a Broadway symbol. Although I think it holds many meanings, I believe that it represents Eric feeling he must hide his face due to his appearance, which in turn makes people fear him because he is unknown to them. Therefore, it makes him a phantom in their eyes. So I totally agree with both of those. Elphaba's hat, the Phantom's
Did you
mask.
say that one more came in this afternoon? Did you?
It only has 2 comments on my.
It's all about the.
Oh, okay.
Oh, here we go. One from Nancy. The fiddler in Fiddler on the Roof represents the difficult balance for the community as well as for Tevye. So that's another great symbol. Thank you, Nancy, for that. And Evan's cast, all of them are great examples of symbols. David, over to you for some announcements.
Terrific. Let me do my own share. Continue. And right here. Okay, here's a little bit about what's coming up at the Broadway Maven.
Shalom, I'm David Benkoff, the Broadway Maven.
The Broadway Maven is a vibrant educational community that helps its members think more deeply about musical theater. Every month, members may attend 5 to 15 classes and other expert-led Broadway experiences, all for just $18. It's your home for Broadway appreciation.
And great news! First-time members get 1 month free. In April, we're doing 2 trivia parties, Time Capsule, September 1925, Assassins with Gail Leondar Wright, and The Wizard of Oz. We've got an all-new, intensive, thorough 8-week course called Become a Broadway Maven, Lyrics and Legacy that meets every Monday in May and June. Learn Broadway history and lyric making from top to bottom. The first week is free. Also in May, a 4-part Sondheim Academy, and in June, a 3-part Les Miserables course. Sign up for membership at the link in the description. See the full calendar at thebroadwaymaven.com, and here's the latest.
Okay, and while we're at it, I am happy to see that Gail Leondar Wright, who is doing the, hi Gail, is doing the session on Assassins is here. So can you unmute yourself, or do we need to? You can't. Hold on. Ask to unmute. There we go.
Beautiful. Great. Thanks, David. Yeah, as David mentioned, on April 22nd, I'm doing an hour on Assassins. And just to give you a little sneak preview, we're going to be looking at Americana and the pastiche score that Sondheim wrote for Assassins in order to say something kind of deep about our national character. So look forward to seeing some of you there.
Sounds like a lot of fun, and we'll see you there. But you got to be a member. Thanks, thanks, Gil. You got to be a member. I got to find the right button. In order to be able to come to that and all the other good stuff that we have at the Broadway Maven. I just put the link, and it's free. You get a month for free and all that good stuff. So please consider doing that today. And back to you, Mateo.
All right, let's get into talking about the score. So, in order to talk about this specific motif that I want to share with you, which is the be yourself motif is what I'm going to call it, I want to use solfege. So here's a little music theory lesson for you. If you don't know what solfege means, you probably have seen solfege being used before, because this is what solfege means. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. That's it. Solfege is just a system where we assign these syllables to name notes. That's do, that's re, that's mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, etc. The reason that this system is really helpful is because it doesn't matter what key we're in, it always applies. So if we're in C major, that means we're starting on the note C and building a major scale up off of that. No matter what major scale we're playing, the first note is always going to be do, the second note is always going to be re, and so on up the scale. We can start a major scale on any note on the piano. So for example, if I start here, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, that's still a major scale. In that major scale, we started on A flat, so it's the A flat major scale. A flat is do. The second note is B flat, so that's re. The third note is C, so that's mi, etc. The reason that that's so important is because when we're comparing different pieces of music that are in different keys, it can sometimes be confusing because, for example, if we're in A major, that melody is C sharp, D, E. If we're in D flat major, that exact same melody is F, G flat, A flat. But they're the same melody because they're both in their respective keys, mi, fa, sol. And that is the be yourself motif. It's 3 notes. Mi, so the third note of whatever scale. Fa, so the fourth note of whatever major scale we're in. And then sol, the 5th note. It's this very lovely, hopeful, small little motif, but it appears everywhere in the score. The first place it appears is in a little number, it's not even a song, called Be Yourself, which is basically just underscoring that the band plays while Evan is giving his first monologue, where he says, today is going to be an amazing day, and here's why, because today all you have to do is just be yourself. And it's being played underneath that monologue. Mi, fa, sol. It also forms the basis of the intro to Evan's big I Want song at the beginning of the show, Waving Through a Window. Mi, fa, sol, right? But it's kind of hidden throughout the entire score. It comes to represent Evan's being true to himself. And as Evan starts to lie, the motif itself starts to get broken apart and then vanishes altogether until at the end it finally comes back. This is Waving Through a Window reprise. This is an extremely important moment in the show because it's the moment where Evan writes the letter that Connor Murphy's going to steal. This is the moment that sets the entire plot in motion. And sure enough, in the respective key that we're in, this is the underscoring. Mi, fa, so. Dear Evan Hansen. Turns out this wasn't an amazing day after all, etc. So it makes sense that this bit of music, it comes at this extremely important moment in the plot. It's the intro to an extremely important song that defines what the main character wants in his life. It's also the first piece of music we hear in the entire show, right at the beginning, which if you saw Howard Ho's BroadwayCon lecture that he did with the Broadway Maven, you'll know how important that first moment of music is. In Hamilton, it's the rhythm of "not throwing away my shot" is the first thing of music that we hear. That becomes the central motif of the central character. So it's an extremely important piece of music. No different here. This 3-note motif kind of encapsulates the entire theme of the show and the moral of the story that we were talking about earlier. So we get through Waving Through a Window. Connor steals the letter. The plot gets set in motion. Evan goes to the Murphys' house for dinner, and this is the first time that he starts telling the lie. And we get this song called For Forever. For Forever starts with the motif, but it's hidden inside the accompaniment. So it goes, all we see is sky, for forever we let the world pass by, for forever. You may not have caught it there, but in the middle, it actually has that mi, fa, so motif there. For forever for forever that mi, fa, so is right there. It's hidden, but it's still there. However, as the song progresses, that motif gets broken up. By the end of the first chorus, they add a note in between and kind of split it up. We get for forever feels like we could go on. So instead of mi, fa, so, now we're getting mi, fa, la, so. So that la just kind of squeezes its way in there and breaks everything else apart. For forever feels like we could go on for forever this way. By the second chorus, the mi, fa, so, be yourself motif is missing. It's incomplete. The so at the end disappears completely. We get mi, and then we get fa, but we do not get so. We then go back to do. So instead of mi, fa, so, for forever we let the world pass by, instead of that, we get a different third note. For forever we let the world pass by, for forever. So the motif is slowly starting to vanish into the musical landscape as Evan begins to lie. Then we get into Sincerely Me, which is the song where Evan and his family friend, Jared Kleinman, write emails pretending to be Connor. And this is where the lie gets really out of hand. And to prove it, the music, there's not a mi, fa, so in sight. The music sounds like this. And that little intro melody for Sincerely Me is arguably the exact opposite of the Be Yourself motif. The Be Yourself motif, first of all, it moves up to so. Mi, fa, so. Also, it moves diatonically, which means it only uses the notes that are in the major scale. You notice it skips this C sharp because that's not in the G major scale. It just goes mi, fa, so. In Sincerely Me, this intro music moves downward towards so. And it does so not diatonically, so using the major scale, but chromatically, so using every single note on the piano. That's chromatic motion, where we don't pay attention to what's part of the scale or what isn't. We just use every key that's available to us. That F natural does not naturally appear in the key signature of G major, and neither does this D sharp. So the Be Yourself motif is upward, diatonic motion. In Sincerely Me, where the lie begins to get out of hand, it becomes chromatic, downward motion. So arguably the exact opposite. Then we get If I Could Tell Her. Now this is a really interesting song because he's singing this to his crush, Zoe Murphy, and he's genuinely telling her how he feels about her. The only problem is that he isn't expressing it totally honestly, because he is hiding it behind the pretense that this is what her brother said about her, and that him and Zoe's brother were friends when obviously they weren't. And so because there's like an element of truth here, there is an element of the Be Yourself motif. We actually get the Be Yourself motif in reverse. Instead of mi, fa, so, we get so, fa, mi. But he kept it all inside his head. So it's like, yeah, he is genuinely feeling these things about Zoe, but the way that he's expressing it is kind of backwards. There it is. There's that Be Yourself motif reversed. The only moment in If I Could Tell Her that we actually get the full mi, fa, so is in the moment where Evan says, I love you. How do you say I love you? There it is. It's the one moment where he's genuinely expressing himself, where he's genuinely saying the thing he's been afraid to say to Zoe, which is, I love you. The other time that we get the full, unadulterated Be Yourself motif in the middle of the story is when Evan begins something called the Connor Project. He starts this organization that is dedicated to keeping Connor's memory alive. And part of what they do is they raise money to reopen the Autumn Smile Apple Orchard, which is a place that ideally teenagers who are struggling can go to get help. So when Evan begins this organization, he is doing something that he genuinely really does want to do, and that he genuinely really does care about. And even though it's based on a lie, the good that he's doing in the world is real. He is doing real good. And so we get the real Be Yourself motif as Evan comes into his own power and for the first time finds the confidence to do something that genuinely he wants to do and that genuinely really, really helps the world. We hear this underneath Evan in this dialogue where he's introducing the Connor Project. Sorry? There it is. Then we get into You Will Be Found. This is a speech that Evan gives at the memorial for Connor, and hidden in this speech is the Be Yourself motif. He tells a story about how Connor came to get him when he fell out of a tree. We later learn that Evan intentionally threw himself out of the tree trying to take his own life. So this was a moment in Evan's life where he felt totally alone and he felt like nobody was there for him. And he tells this story, it's a lie, but he tells the story about how Connor came and helped him in that moment. what he's genuinely doing is he's genuinely trying to impart hope on the people who are listening to him, right? He says, have you ever felt like nobody was there? Have you ever felt forgotten in the middle of nowhere? At the end of the verse he says, someone will come running, and I know they'll take you home. And the chorus, even when the dark comes crashing through, you will be found. So even though he's wrapping up the message in this lie, the message is still a genuine message of hope. And so in the intro music, that Be Yourself music is hidden inside the chords. So these are the chords. It's G sharp minor, E with a suspended second, and then B. Now those chords could be played like this to really highlight the Be Yourself motif, right? But instead, because again, the message that Evan's trying to get across is being hidden in a lie, they break it up a little bit. So it's the Mi of Mi Fa So is the middle note of the first chord. Then it becomes the bottom note of the second chord. The Fa is the bottom note of the second chord. So that's Mi and then Fa. And then the So is the second note of the last chord. So, but all together, Mi, Fa, So. The Mi, Fa, So is hidden in there. Later in You Will Be Found, at the big climax, when we see all of these people who have been affected by Evan's speech, we see Larry Murphy, Connor's father, who's able to cry about his son for the first time. The dam breaks open and he's finally able to grieve his son. All of these amazing good things are coming out of Evan's speech. The choir sings, sure enough, to take you home. Sure enough, it's Mi Fa So. In Act 2, Evan starts to date Zoe Murphy, Connor's sister. And they sing a love song called Only Us. It's a beautiful song. But what's notably missing from it is that Mi Fa So. In these chords, the Mi Fa So should be blatantly obvious, right? We've got D flat. Then we've got B flat minor 7. Then we've got E flat minor 7. And then we've got A flat, right? In that chord progression, it's very easy to find Mi, Fa, So. But the way it's arranged, that isn't in that arrangement at all. The Mi only comes at the very first note of the chord change to kind of establish the harmony, but after that, there's no Mi in any of these chords here, even though there's supposed to be a Mi in the D flat chord. There isn't. They just leave it out completely. And then here there's supposed to be a Mi in the B flat minor chord, but they leave that out completely as well. So instead of Mi, Fa, So, we just get this kind of open, empty sound. So it can be us, and only us, and what came before won't count anymore or matter. We can try that, right? It's not, it doesn't have the Mi, Fa, So, even though the chords beg for it. They are very intentionally, it seems, leaving that out, because this relationship is totally based on a lie. The truth, though, comes out, as it always does. So this is Words Fail, which is kind of the 11 o'clock number. And this is where Evan Hansen tells the truth. It starts with this very kind of empty, open sound. But sure enough, that Mi, Fa, So starts creeping back in as he begins to tell the Murphys it's all a lie and I wasn't friends with Connor. He finally tells the truth and the Mi, Fa, So comes back. First it comes back with an added note, this minor sixth note, this E flat here, which is so such a heartbreaking sound. Just give this a listen. So I just stand here, sorry, searching for something to say. So it is mi, fa, so, with just that added note in the middle. Then as the orchestration keeps building, the piano is playing the so over and over. While the cello plays the mi to the fa. Together it sounds like this. So again, the mi, fa, so is now totally there. It's just spread out between two different instruments, so it's not totally together yet. Then we get to Words Fail Part 2, which is after the Murphy family leaves and Evan Hansen is alone on stage, and he finally admits to himself, "This was just a sad invention. It wasn't real, I know." Those are the You Will Be Found chords. Have you ever felt like nobody was there? Right? Now literally nobody is there. He's alone on stage. But the mi, fa, so is hidden in that accompaniment in the exact same way. There it is. But finally, the mi, fa, so assumes its true form and becomes the bass line of the entire orchestration at the big climax of the song when Evan goes, "'Cause I've learned to slam on the brake before I even turn the key, before I make the mistake, before I lead with the worst of me. I never let them see the worst of me," etc. The bass there is just mi, fa, so. It's banging out this lesson that is screaming to Evan to be heard. But we get to the end of the song and we don't quite get it. We might expect that at the end he says, "I'm going to step into the sun." And we get right? A very lovely ending that wraps up in a little bow, but it's not over yet. He doesn't fully internalize the lesson quite yet. There's one more thing that needs to happen. Here, instead, he goes, "How do I step in?" Step into the sun. So instead of mi, fa, sol, we're getting do, re, fa, which is similar. It moves upwards, but it's not quite the same. It's not quite the motif yet. And we get a little bit of the motif here in the cello, but otherwise it's almost not to be found at all in this section. And we end on that chord, which isn't the tonic chord, so it doesn't resolve. And the scene changes and Evan finds himself in a scene with his mom. This is it. This is the last thing he needs to do. He tells his mom the truth. He tells his mom that he lied about being friends with Connor. And he also tells his mom that last summer he tried to take his own life. And when he is honest with his mom about that, she says that she loves him for who he truly is. And she sings this song about how she loves him for who he really is, no lying. And this is the intro. There it is. There's that mi, fa, so that we've been waiting for. And at the climax of the song, she says, "Your mom isn't going anywhere. Your mom is waiting. Your mom is staying right here." And underneath, the bass is still, "Your mom isn't going anywhere. Your mom is staying right here. Your mom isn't going anywhere." Mi, fa, so. And that's what he learns. When you be yourself, the connections that you make, the people who love you for who you really are and not for the lies that you tell, they don't go anywhere. they stay. And that's the lesson of Dear Evan Hansen. And that lesson is baked into the score using a motif, which is my favorite thing in the entire world. So we've got a little bit of time left. So I think I might share with you one of my audition videos for Dear Evan Hansen, if you all want to see it. So here is me singing Waving Through a Window. Let me make sure that my computer sound is shared so you can hear it. On the outside, always looking in, will I ever be more than I've always been? 'Cause I'm tap, tap, tapping on the glass, waving through a window. I try to speak, but nobody can hear, so I wait around for an answer to appear while I'm watching people pass, waving through a window. Oh, can anybody see? Is anybody waving back at me? Is anybody waving, waving, waving? Whoa, whoa. Obviously, I was a little bit younger then and a little bit more cleanly shaved, but thank you. Thanks, Julian. The last thing I want to share with you is this is very personal, and it doesn't actually have anything to do with Dear Evan Hansen, but it does, is that Dear Evan Hansen taught me the power of never giving up. Because that song sucks to sing. Like, it's a great song, but it is so hard to sing. It is brutal. And I couldn't sing it when I first started trying. So I practiced every single day, and I would record myself and play it back, and I would do exercises while I was singing it, and I would sound terrible, but then slowly I learned over the course of time how to sing it the way you just heard me sing it. So I've got a little montage that I think is very funny, and I hope you'll all join me in laughing at myself. This is a montage of me trying to learn how to sing Waving Through a Window, and not sounding very good. And hopefully this will inspire you. Whatever you're working on that you're not good at yet, keep practicing. Because you're probably not as bad as I was at singing Waving Through a Window in some of these videos. Ready? Here we go. I'm 17 in this video. I'll never be more than I've always been, 'cause I'm tap, tap, tapping on that glass. I'm waving through a window. This is a version that I put on with my high school friends in a basement for fun. I'm waving through a window, waving through a window, waving through a window, waving through a window, waving through a window. Can anybody see? Is anybody waving back at me? Is anybody waving? 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 That's my favorite one. That's so funny. So, that's actually pretty good. So the moral of the story is never give up. because you can sound like that, but if you keep practicing, one day you can sound like this. Waiting, waiting, whoa, whoa.
Mateo,
There you go.
Mateo,
Yeah, David. Yeah.
let's talk about Pasek and Paul.
Yeah, for sure.
We recently talked about Stephen Schwartz and how his music has a certain sound. To me, Pasek and Paul's verses are just too slow and boring until the songs really get started. That's my concern about them. But how would you, just like you told us about Stephen Schwartz, how would you describe their music?
Well, it's interesting because they started writing stuff that was really, really complex and interesting. Like Edges and even more so Dogfight. Some of the music in Dogfight is just sheer brilliance.
Right.
But I think they realized that if they wanted to be popular, they needed to simplify their music enough for a wider audience's consumption. And they did so. And so if you look at, Dogfight, like some of those songs have these very complex arrangements, like there's so much happening in that riff from Dogfight, and then Some Kind of Time is even crazier. I can't even play it. I don't know how to play it. But La La Land, and well, they didn't write the music for La La Land, but Greatest Showman, for example, like it's almost all four chords. All the shine of 1,000 spotlights, all the stars we steal from the night sky will never be enough. Right? Like it's just so I don't know necessarily what their sound is, because I kind of think that they stopped writing in their sound in order to write in something that was more poppy when they went to Hollywood. But if I had to name it, I think it's a lot of very kind of beautiful arpeggiated piano parts over pop chords. That's very true of Edges. It's very true of Evan Hansen, and it's very true of a lot of even their newer stuff, like For Forever, for example. Those are some like very complicated piano arpeggios, but they're just arpeggios over, some pretty basic chords, right? So it's like beautiful piano arpeggiation over basic chords is how I would define a Pasek and Paul ballad.